Hello, everyone, to the Men of Law podcast. Men of Law is a motion picture that'll be coming out soon. And Tony Morris here, he helped play guitar. He played all the guitars on the soundtrack on a couple of songs on the movie that we recorded right here at the How Much Studios.
And you composed the music?
I composed the music, yes.
I just played the notes.
Right. And that was recorded right here, the How Much Studios in Austin, Texas. So we're here to talk to Tony, see what he's up to as a musician.
Well, thanks, Carl. It's good to see you again. I think it's been since yesterday or day before. Did you miss me? So.
I did, yes.
But yeah, it's good to be here. It was fun to play on your movie, and also I was there for a couple of days of filming. That was fun. That you shot out in Smithville. I'm not the world's greatest drone operator, but I did some drone shots for your film and then promptly crashed my drone into the top of a pine tree out there in Smithville. Managed to still find it, still works. So
I'm glad to hear that. We used some of your drone shots.
Yeah, it looks great. So and looking forward to seeing your movie, although I saw it when you're doing color correction the other day. It looks good. It's fun to be there for the filming of it and kind of see the rehearsals and all the chaos that goes on behind the scenes off camera, people running around, and there's something that always goes wrong no matter how much you prepare for those things, and then you get to see how people react to, like, when maybe some piece of equipment doesn't work right, or someone ends up smashing their elbow on something, and then you got to figure those things out. So that was fun to see.
Definitely. And then there's things that you notice in the footage months and months later,
yeah.
Way downstream, like, oh, there's an arm in the shot, there's a piece of equipment in the corner, let's get rid of that.
Yeah, that's a fun thing. There's the famous ones, and that one, I think, is the original Ben-Hur movie. There's the big chariot race. Supposedly, one of the actors, according to legend, has a wristwatch on. So that, it's kind of one of the legendary things. And this is probably before your time, but there was this old Daniel Boone TV show back in the, I think it's late 60s, early 70s. And at the end of one of the episodes, like, Daniel Boone goes walking off into the wilderness, and then you look up in the sky and there's a little jet contrail overhead. So, film late 60s. So those little mistakes that are fun to see.
Yeah.
Of course, if you're the one making it, you just like groan and cringe, but for everybody else, it's cool.
Well, hopefully we have a story that's compelling enough.
Yeah.
So that any little flaws, people will overlook.
Yeah.
I believe we have.
Sometimes what's cool is when you're filming something, and not that I've done a bunch of filming. As you know, I did a pre-production trailer for a film I wrote, Marfa Ghost Stories, which you were in that. And I'm about 4/5 done with the editing for a PBS TV pilot called American Classic, which we filmed at the Bishop's Palace historical building in Galveston, Texas. But what I was going to say was, one of the fun things is sometimes when you film something, you're filming it and don't notice it at the time, and you'll see weird anomalous stuff. Like we filmed in this old 1892 house, the Bishop's Palace, originally called Gresham's Castle. But I was looking through the footage, and you see this old Gothic Victorian house, and you think, oh, that looks so haunted. And then I'm looking through footage of everything, and I'm seeing weird little anomalies of light and stuff, and it's like, that doesn't look like a ghost, but I have no idea how that reflection, why is that reflection moving and the camera isn't, and no one else is moving, So those are kind of fun to see afterwards when you're looking at the footage as you're editing it. So
it would be interesting to look at other stuff that's been shot there, to see if they had some history of spectral phenomena
Yeah, it's funny. I was having this conversation with my sister like literally 2 days ago. We were talking about orbs and stuff in photographs. And in 2010, I did a gig for the U.S. State Department. I went to Paraguay to serve as a cultural envoy because there's a famous guitar player that comes from Paraguay named Agustin Barrios Mongaray, who I wrote a movie script about also. But the thing I noticed after I got home from Paraguay, one of the places I played a bunch of concerts in 12 days, but I also played in this guy, Agustin Barrios Mongaray's childhood home, and on his birthday, which is May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. So when I got home and I'm looking through all these photographs and everything, in his house, I'm there playing guitar, and there's all these little orbs in the in the photograph, and it's like, wow, that's interesting. I didn't notice any orbs when I was playing, but they're certainly there in the photographs.
Wow.
Oh, and also another, since we're already on a woo-woo orb topic, sorry. In 2002, played at the White House during Christmas for the first time, and I was there with a trio, or a quartet. It's me, a flute player, cello player, and a percussionist who I still play with. And we took a photo. We played in the East Ballroom. It's kind of where they have, big, balls, events there. It's kind of a ceremonial room. And there's all these historic paintings in there that you've seen before, Like there's a painting of Teddy Roosevelt. So our group, we took a photo in front of this old painting of Teddy Roosevelt, and in the painting he's kind of standing like this, and there was an orb over his heart, in the painting. So it's like we're all standing around, and here's this above us, behind us, painting of Teddy Roosevelt. He's standing there too, and he's got this orb on his heart. So that was
That wasn't there when you filmed.
No. And the funny thing is, the guy who took the photo is the wife of one of the musicians that played with me, or the husband of one of the musicians that played with me. He took the photo, and he didn't take it with a flash either. So I could see if you're having an orb in a photo, and it's like a reflection of like a flash, But this is just, sunlight in a room. So that was kind of weird.
Weird. Wow. Was that a digital photograph or film?
I don't know. I assume it'd be digital, but I guess it could have been. I think it was digital, so I don't know.
You could have it analyzed and...
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, if I was that motivated. It's in case it is something explainable, I don't want to know about it.
Yeah.
Let's leave it as unknown and with the potential of being like spooky stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want it totally debunked. Come on, man.
Now, Tony is a professional classical guitar player. So for those who don't know, what makes a classical guitar a classical guitar?
Well, it's just, I guess you could say any guitar is a classical guitar. Technically, you're playing classical music on a guitar, but to do that, typically it's played on an acoustic guitar that's got nylon strings, like a flamenco guitar. Originally they had gut, but ever since, the invention of nylon right about the end of, World War II, they found that nylon works way better than gut. It's like if there's a change in humidity, your gut strings, they go crazy. It used to be, back in the gut string days, pre-World War II, you wanted to get a set of strings, you go to the butcher, So you go to the butcher counter and get me some guts for some intestines for strings. And in fact, I talked with, I used to have a guitar string company that sponsored my radio show for the first 7 years. Now I have a different string company sponsoring me now. But this first family that sponsored, I went to go visit them, and their family had been making guitar strings since the 1400s.
Wow.
And he was talking about how they used, sheep intestine. But it's like, it's not only for strings for instruments, not to get gross or whatever, but animal materials used for tons of stuff, like tennis rackets. There's probably more guts used for like tennis rackets than strings. So, but anyway, back to your original thing. It's classical guitar. You're playing classical music, written out music, instrumental music on an acoustic guitar, and then that's typically done on a guitar that's got nylon or gut strings, and you're striking the strings with your right hand fingers instead of using a pick, because other kinds of guitar, like if you're playing electric guitar, you're playing with a pick most of the time, and you're playing chords. Well, of course, electric guitar, you'll play individual single line notes too, but you're usually accompanying singing. But this is instrumental music, so you're playing the melody, the accompaniment, the bass line. So, but you're all doing it with one hand. So that's why you're using, 4 fingers of your right hand. You could use 5, but because your right hand pinky finger doesn't move independently so much of your ring finger. It's like try to move your pinky without moving your ring finger. You can a little bit, but it's not as independent as the others.
Yeah.
So typically, you're using just 4 fingers, thumb, index, middle, ring. So, which is why I've got these long fingernails. Actually, they're nylon because I'm also a drummer. And I'm always breaking fingernails, so I have to super glue these nylon things onto my fingernails because I break them faster than I can grow them. So,
but you pick the nylon strings with those long
you're
nails?
using a combination when you play classical guitar. You're actually catching the string. You're getting a combination sound of the point where the string makes contact with your fingernail and the flesh and your skin. Because if you play with just fingernail, it sounds like a pick. It sounds kind of thin. And if you play with just skin, it's kind of dull. But if you use a combination of those two, it sounds thin and dull. No, it's like you get the clarity of the fingernail, but you have some kind of resonance to it that you get from the flesh. So it's clear, but it's also, the note has some kind of meat on the bone, so to speak. It's a little bit more punchy than just playing with a piece of plastic or something, or fingernail. So
you must have music that's hundreds of years old that you can play.
I think, for classical guitar, we play guitar music, but we play on pluck stringed instruments that precede the guitar too, like Renaissance lute, which goes back to 1500s and a little bit even 1400s. Then you've got the Spanish vihuela, which is Baroque period, kind of 16 to 1700s. You've got the Baroque lute, 1600 to about 750 or so. You've got these other instruments, the theorbo, which is looks like a lute, but it's got the huge long neck. Those instruments you see in old paintings. It looks like a watermelon-shaped body, and it's got this super long neck. But those pluck-stringed instruments, music, those can be played with some arranging on guitar usually. So we've got music going back hundreds of years. I think I'm not playing it now, but I think the oldest piece of music that I've ever played was from the 1200s. It's there are a couple of pieces from the 1200s Spain. 1200s, these cantigas de Santa Maria, and it's just basically all it's left is a melody line, and then you make up stuff to harmonize it. So I was playing those because they're pretty cool, and some of the old Spanish music is common to even modern Spanish music, like if you listen to flamenco or, well, any kind of Spanish music, a lot of times you'll hear they'll have these 12 beat cycles, and a thing that they like to do is, you can count to 12, you can go 6 plus 6, or you can go 3 plus 3 plus 3, or 4 plus, or 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3, or 4 plus 4 plus 4, or then you can divide that down. But there's a thing in the Spanish music where a lot of times they'll do these divisions where it's like 3 plus 3, and then it'll alternate into 2 plus 2 plus 2. So you have these rhythmic cycles that'll go 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2. So even in this 1200 piece, it's got this thing in it where it goes da 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 da, like that. And it's like, wow, that's cool. It's like 1200 AD, and it's like it's the same beat as "I Want to Live in America." Of course, that's Leonard Bernstein.
Yeah.
So, but he was writing in a Spanish style, Puerto
Right.
Rican style. So,
Which was very Spanish.
yeah. In fact, I play a Spanish Baroque piece called Canarios from the Canary Islands, and it's got that same rhythm in it. So anyway, being a drummer and a guitarist, I gravitate toward music that's pretty rhythmic. So anyway.
It makes you wonder, because hundreds of years ago they didn't have any electronics. So what did people dance to? So
They had to make their own.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a tragedy of the modern era, is that the most common musical experience that is enjoyed by most people is completely sedentary and 100% as an audience member instead of making it yourself. I mean, that's the majority musical experience for most people nowadays. But pre-recorded music, I would say, if not most people, way more than now, everybody or lots of people, somebody in your family usually played an instrument. Usually everybody sang, people, and it doesn't have to have anything to do with, income level, but certainly, if you have more money, maybe you had a piano at home. If you didn't have as much, maybe you had some guitars or maybe even a stringed instrument you made yourself as a kid with, a jug and a string over a broom handle or something. But the main thing is that it was, participatory instead of
Right.
as a, spectator experience. So that's kind of a thing that I grieve a little bit, but hopefully, that'll change. I think I would say one of the good things about people having some social media and having phones where they can record and film everything is, like, I see now is a lot more people are really excited to film themselves playing guitar and drums, which I think is great. Because, as a music teacher, I'll tell my students, it's like, hey, it's a good thing to record yourself, because, 6 months from now, you're going to look at this and go, man, I used to play that crappy. And then it's like, wow. And when you can see your progress over time, it's a huge motivator. And plus, it's a document. Like, what if you get hit by a truck, and it's like, people, when people pass away, it's like these videos and photos become very precious. Like, I mean, this happened to me yesterday. A friend of mine passed away like 3 years ago, and it came up. He came over to my apartment. He's not a guitar player mainly. He's a singer. You know him because we both worked on the Marfa Ghost Stories together. Ben Dodson, who passed away, and he's just like came over my house and he goes, "Hey, homie," and I had my guitar on the sofa, and he picked it up, starts playing it, and I got my phone and filmed it there. And of course, we're just goofing around, and he wasn't really trying or anything.
Yeah.
He's like, ah. But now it's like he's passed away. It's like that thing's precious because, like, that's it.
Right.
So anyway, so that was a long tangent. I'm sorry.
No, music has a way of outlasting us.
Yeah. And I for my radio show, I remember this quote. I got to interview Pepe Romero, who's, one of the greatest classical guitarists of all time. He's made a gazillion recordings, but he's a fantastic guitar player. But he's kind of like, if you imagine Yoda but Spanish and didn't have irregular grammar, he'll say these like very wise things. He'll say, music touches us in the same place that we feel love. And it's like, and then that's actually true.
Yeah.
Because actually, one of the things that I do with my my organization, Classical Guitar Live, that's the name of the radio show, but that's also the nonprofit that funds that work, is we do this music and medicine program, and where we send musicians, it's myself and others, to go play in hospitals and hospices. And I was doing some research on, the impact music has on people. Like there's actual medical studies that show that it actually helps people that you can measure scientifically. And there's this one dementia and Alzheimer's study, and they were talking about, as people have Alzheimer's and various kinds of dementia, because it's not just one type of dementia or Alzheimer's, the brain doesn't go kind of everything at once. There's parts that kind of shut down first, and I'm not a brain person, so I can't quote which part of the brain, but the part of the brain that's kind of where kind of the seat of our emotions, that's also, it is like Pepe Romero, where we feel love. The music part of the brain is connected. Where we appreciate sound as music, it's tied in the same area where we feel emotions, where we feel love. But that's also one of the later parts of the brain to go. And I've had this experience where I've played in hospice hundreds of times, and I've played in old folks' homes, is sometimes you'll be playing for people who they can't speak, but if you play a song, they can sing, and it's the weirdest thing.
Really?
Like they can't talk, but if you start playing like "You Are My Sunshine," they'll start singing it. They can't talk, but they can sing that song.
Yeah.
It's the craziest thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I was talking with, actually, we did, one of the things that Classical Guitar Live did, it was right before, it was in 2019, right before everything shut down for COVID. We filmed up at Baylor Medical Hospital in Dallas, the big Baylor, BUMC they call it, Baylor University Medical Center. It's a big, huge research hospital. And I interviewed this palliative doctor, and he was telling about music, how he uses music and he's a guitar player and a really good singer. He's a folk guy, but he's like a top palliative and physician. But he was saying, and we got it on film, him saying this, sometimes when he's helping stroke patients, they're having a hard time pulling the words from their brain. The words are in their brain, but when you have a stroke, these kind of connections get interrupted, and the brain has to kind of rework itself to where you can remember that word. But he said sometimes he would ask a person a question and they couldn't answer it, but if he would sing it to them and get them to sing it back, then they could answer. And the example he goes, "How are you doing today?" Kind of like jovial.
Yeah.
And he said the person would go, I'm okay. Like they could talk that way.
Right.
But if you said, they would just be struggling. He said it's the craziest thing.
Wow.
But yeah, he said he'll have his colleagues say, "What, are you crazy? You're talking to your patients or you're singing to your patients?" He's like, "Yeah, I am."
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of one of the things. It's kind of on first level. You think it's like, oh, it's nice to play music for patients and everything, and you think it's kind of this hippy dippy thing, but there's no hard data behind it to support it. It's like, au contraire, I've got all the data. I mean, I've seen studies literally from cradle to grave. There's been, I think it's a Dutch study, I don't remember for sure, but they did a study on oxygen absorption rates on premature infants. They're in incubators, ones that were where it was silent, and preemies where they have like little music piped in. The oxygen absorption rates were higher for the ones that had music. And also, again, with the end-of-life patients, they tend to be more lucid when there's a musical thing, going on. So, literally cradle to grave studies with music. And the great thing about, music as some kind of alternative therapy is, unlike a drug, when you prescribe a drug, it's going to have, intended effects, hopefully, but it's probably going to have some side effects because most drugs do. And you don't know what the side effects are until you prescribe the drug. But, with music, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You play a wrong note and you're going to irritate somebody. Mm-hmm. But as Dr. Fine up in Dallas says, about music, it's like beneficial and no side effects. So, but another thing we got on tape that was really cool, we interviewed this pianist. He's one of the musicians up there at Baylor Medical in Dallas. His name's Tony Arant. He has a electric piano he has on a dolly. He just goes around room to room, plays for patients. Of course, he'll ask the patient, or the nurse will ask the patient, say, "Hey, we've got a musician here. Would you like to hear some music?" And they'll say either yes or no. If they say no, fine. If they say yeah, maybe, and then they'll go play for him. And so he told this story that's really crazy. He was playing. He said they had a young woman, youngish. She was in her early 30s, he guessed. She had been in a car wreck. She was in a coma, and she'd been in a coma for weeks, like hadn't spoken. And he said also, sometimes when people are in a coma, their eyes are shut, but sometimes people's they're in a coma, but their eyes are open and they're just like darting around, but they're not there, and so there's this young woman, she's in a coma, and so she'd been in it for weeks, so he brings his piano, brought it right up to her bed. He said he actually pushed his piano right up to the bed, so the vibrations of it are like going through the bed she's in, and he's looking at her and he's thinking, like, I wonder what kind of music she listened to when she was little. She's thinking, oh, I bet, when she's a little girl, these Disney movies. He goes, I know it. I bet she probably watched that Beauty and the Beast Disney movie when she's a little girl. I'm going to play that. So he starts playing that Beauty and the Beast big song. I forget what it is. It's whatever, huge hit Alan Menken wrote. And he starts playing it for her, and all of a sudden she goes, Beauty and the Beast. It's like, wow. She hadn't spoken in weeks.
Yeah.
I think he said it was like 6 weeks. And the girl's mother had been staying in the room. She had been like sleeping in the room. And all of a sudden the mom freaks out. She goes flying out of the room, goes to the nurse's station and says, my daughter started talking, my daughter. And and they, bring him in there and everything. And it was like, that was kind of the lever that kind of broke that ice. And of course, obviously, it wasn't a thing where all of a sudden she's miraculously 100% cured.
Right.
But the music thing, that is what broke through so that she can get this additional, therapies and treatment, and help her to recover. But Tony Arendt, the guy who did that and told me that story, and I got him on film telling that story too. If anybody wants to hear him tell it, you can just search Music and Medicine, Classical Guitar Live. It's on YouTube, him telling it. But he said in all of his years of playing at the hospital, he said, that's the most powerful thing that I personally have seen music do.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a head trip.
That's amazing. I wonder how many other people could have been helped, but nobody thought to play music or put the instrument right up against the bed so they could feel the vibrations.
Well, I was, years ago, I was talking with a colleague of mine. She's also a classical guitar player named Julie Goldberg. She's out of Chicago, outside of Chicago, Evanston, Illinois. She's played in hospitals, long time. I think maybe even longer than me. And I interviewed her for my radio show, and she said she was playing in, I forget, it wasn't a chemo infusion room. Anyway, someplace where patients were getting treated, it was a kidney dialysis. There were this patient was getting dialysis. And for a lot of these treatments, it helps the patient. If you're calmer, you can receive treatment. Your body can receive it more effectively. If you're all nervous and ratcheted up, whether it's dialysis or chemo or whatever, it's like your body doesn't accept these treatments as efficiently as if you're calmer, and in a steadier state. So she would play in the dialysis center, and she'd play like in one area for about 20 minutes. She'd go off, play somewhere else. And she said she was getting up to leave, and this nurse came over who was a musician herself, but she was a nurse. She goes, "Hey, I wanted to show you something. I marked on this patient's chart the moment right before you started to play, and I also marked this patient's chart right when you stop playing, and it's like heart rate, blood pressure. It's like everything was way down. They didn't have the racing heart. Their blood pressure is way down. They're way chiller, and as far as treatments go, musicians are like the cheapest thing of anything to hire at a hospital, but it's like one of the least invasive therapies, and a complementary one. It doesn't get in the way of other therapies,
right.
And it helps everything better. And what's interesting too is, if you go back, centuries ago, it's interesting that, the ancient Greek tradition, Apollo, he's the god of music and medicine, and his son Asclepius or whatever is the first doctor or something. Anyway, there's always this connection of music and medicine. And if you go back like into the biblical tradition, King David, before he was King David, David who shot Goliath, he's playing his lyre, stringed instrument, plucked stringed instrument, precursor of the guitar. He's playing for King Saul because King Saul would be tormented by these thoughts, these evil spirits, these thoughts. And David would play his lyre when it would soothe him. So there you've got a 3,000-year-old text documenting the use of a plucked string music in, a therapy. So these things are documented, not only in the Judeo-Christian tradition, but, ancient Greeks, There's even the craziest thing I saw was actually in Australia. They would when setting bones, the Aborigines, they would, as part of this bone setting therapy or ritual and treatment, there's always chanting, and playing music. It's like we're going to get that leg set.
Right.
We're going to set that bone that's broken, or whatever it is.
Yeah, our body responds to sound waves.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, and actually, if you take it as music down to the component of sound, they use sound to break up kidney stones. So
right.
I don't, we don't really call the sonic treatment music. The term music is an interpretive term to describe sound that has a meaning to us in some way that resonates with us.
Right.
So, but hey, the component of music is sound, or the two components of music, it's sound and time, and then it's got to have a listener. So,
I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm fascinated by frequency healing, using energy to heal.
Yeah.
Sound waves and other kinds of waves. And I know somebody with a Rife machine, Royal Raymond Rife. This would be a whole nother topic for a whole nother show.
Yeah, I don't know what this is.
But he was a legit scientist many years ago who came up with a machine that would use sound waves to kill parasites and cancer cells.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing stuff.
This is the first time I'm hearing of this.
Yeah, well, we'll get into this. And he was eventually shut down by the government because you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah. Surprise,
unapproved
surprise.
treatment. But anyway, that's a fascinating thing that we could go into.
Well, I could see. I could see potentially the science of that, because, I know, for what is it, like kidney stones? Those are crystals. They're not stones. They're crystals. And as anybody knows who's had a physics class, you study resonances and harmonics.
Right.
Like for musicians, you get a string, you divide it in half, you got a harmonic at the 50% point. It's an octave higher. Well, crystals have harmonics also. So it stands to reason, you can break a crystal, just like a glass,
Yeah, the lady singing.
Yeah. You find the resonance point, the resonance note of a crystal, you get it loud enough and you get that thing resonating and it shatters, So, yeah, I could see if you had let's say some kind of cancer cell and it had a resonance frequency, but I could see the downside of, well, what if it doesn't have or it's on so many frequencies that there's not one predominant that you could kind of overload.
Needs to be researched.
Yeah, look it up. Yeah, so definitely look it up. So it's funny is when we kind of look at some of this kind of ancient wisdom stuff, music and healing, as you research it, hard data, hard science now, a lot of times we're finding that it confirms something that we already knew a long time ago. We're just kind of discovering the mechanics.
Rediscovering things.
Yeah, we're
knew.
Discovering how it does it.
Yeah.
It's like we're not discovering that it does it. It's like we're finding how it does it, and we're kind of proving something already realized or at least suspected, so, which is always interesting.
So as we wrap it up here, why don't you tell us a bit about your radio show?
Yeah.
Tony has a radio show that is nationally syndicated on hundreds of stations.
Yeah, it's called Classical Guitar Live. That's also the name of the organization that funds the program. It's a 1-hour weekly radio program that's about classical guitar and related instruments. Sometimes I'll have classical mandolin on it, and I've interviews with guitarists, composers, and just interesting people that relate to the music in some way. I started it. I came to UT for graduate school, graduated, in May of '93, and I was like, my last semester, I was like, man, what am I going to do? And my teacher, the professor here at UT, Adam Holzman, he said, hey, there's a guitar job opening up at University of Houston. You know, why don't you apply for that? You know, be the guitar prof there and be the local guy and you know, kind of work your way. It's a big city. And so I thought, yeah, I'll do that. So I was thinking, okay, I'll apply for that job. And then I was kind of brainstorming, how can I kind of promote myself? And I thought, I know what, I'll do a radio show on like a local public radio station about classical guitar, you know, just for free, just to do it, you know. And so anyway, I didn't get the job, and they hired, you know, local there that they knew and everything, which I understand. But I was kind of disappointed, but I was thinking, but wait, that guitar radio show idea, maybe I could do that here anyway. So I started harassing the two public stations here, KMFA, the classical station, and KUT, the NPR affiliate. And KMFA said yes, and said, we'll do it on a trial basis, see if people like it or not. And so I started that in October of '93, and luckily they just never canceled me. So
Wow, so 32 years?
I'm afraid so, yeah.
Wow.
So, and now I do it 100% at home, but I used to produce the show in their studios, and now I do it at home. You know, I've got a USB mic in a studio, and, you know, have my own separate organization and everything. So, because I wanted to do more than just the radio show, I wanted to do this music and medicine stuff in hospitals. So, and also I've just I've shot a TV pilot for PBS stations called American Classic. It's part historic home tour, part house concert, and that's about 4/5 done editing of that. So I wanted to do some other stuff besides just radio, so I started my own nonprofit org. So, but yeah, the radio show, it's on like 220 or 50, I'm not even sure now because it changes.
Yeah.
Stations, mainly NPR affiliates all over the country. I've got a few internationals. I think the farthest away station I'm on is DZFE in Manila in the Philippines. And I'm on Hawaii Public Radio. I have a bunch of stations in Alaska, some in Puerto Rico. I think that's the furthest south. New Hampshire Public Radio, you know. So it's all over. And here in Austin, it's on KMFA twice a week. KMFA is 89.5 FM, and it's Thursdays at 9 p.m. and Sundays at 12 noon. But also I have like over 500 episodes of the show online. If you look up classicalguitarlive.org, you'll find it there and you can listen to it. I've interviewed all kinds of people. One of the funniest things that happen, you know, sometimes when you're doing something and you're not making any money at it, you know, it's like sometimes all you need is just a little bit of encouragement to keep going. So in the early days, in 1998, my show had just started national syndication, national distribution in '97, and I started picking up a few stations gradually. And then in summer of '98, I go into the radio station to do a live on-air shift, and I get a note from one of my fellow announcers. He goes, "Hey, there's some guy named Jimmy Page called for you, and he heard your show."
Some guy.
Well, he was a classical music guy. He wasn't a rock and roll guy. So he didn't know Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. He goes, "Some guy named Jimmy Page called for you, and he wants you to call him at this number. He heard your show in some station in Florida and wants you to call him back, you know." And I'm like, right. And I rolled it up and I threw it in the trash.
Yeah.
And I just went to work. You know, it's like, I just figured it's one of my school guitar nerd buddies, you know, that's going to do some bad accent on the phone.
Yeah, messing with you.
Yeah. So, but then it started to bug me. I was like, that was an out-of-state area code. That would be kind of an elaborate practical joke to get, It wasn't 512 or even 210. So anyway, so I fished it out of the trash, and mind you, I'm running the radio station on air, while I'm doing this. And I noticed that it is an out-of-state area code, and like, I'm going to call it. And I called it, and it was some hotel in Pensacola. It's like, whatever fancy hotel, I don't remember what it was. And it had the room number, it had the extension number, and they said, blah, 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 hotel. And then I called the room number, or I said, can I have extension so-and-so? And the guy answering the phone, his demeanor changed, and he got suddenly real serious. He's like, yes, I can connect you with that. And I was like, holy crap, this is legit. So I called it. He wasn't there. I left a message, and then he called me back, and I ended up talking. He called me back, or his handler. I got called at the station. I get the call, and KMFA, and this guy, English accent, he goes, hello, Tony. I go, yeah. Hey, he says, Matt Williamson. Jimmy's right here. He wants to talk to you. So it's his assistant, Matt Williamson. So, hello, Tony. And so I talked to him 15 or 20 minutes, and luckily at the radio station they have a record button. You can record calls in case you get a weirdo phone call. So I didn't ask for permission. I just recorded it.
Yeah.
So I have it on tape. I
Wow.
talked to him 15, 20. He was so cool. He was so nice, and he was legitimately like, what was that piece? And he told about he had classical guitar lessons, and it was so cool and everything. So,
Oh, wow.
So, and he learned how to read music because he took classical guitar lessons. So,
And
so-
people can find that recording?
yeah.
online?
I actually produced a fundraiser episode of my radio show because NPR stations are starting to do their pledge drives. So on my fundraiser episode, I have that little blurb of Jimmy Page talking about, classical guitar and listening to it, and he liked the radio show and everything.
Nice.
So I'm like, thank you.
Nice.
So I have. So yeah, you can hear that. So, and me totally spazzing out, totally uncool, sounding like the idiot that I was and am. Totally not cool at all. I don't care. I don't
Yeah.
care.
Nice. Well, thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
for
Thanks
being
for
here.
having me. I think we've used up all of your time with my blabbering.
That's okay. You're going to play something for us,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. We're going
Okay.
to change the scenario, and Tony's going to play something. So
Okay.
stick around. Thanks for watching.
Anyway, there it is. A little rough, but oh well.